listening to Cents Per Mile with your host, Charles Gracie, and his co-host, Paul Gibson. Joined by Josh Haynes, they'll be tackling tough industry topics, asking even tougher questions, all to find better solutions as they try to make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. What's going on, guys? What are we talking about on today's episode of Cents Per Mile?
We're talking about intent. How do you get it? How do you maintain it? And how do you gauge it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, we've talked about a few different components of that, and it's kind of came up as a side subject, but we figured today we would cover it and see what you could do, especially in this weird time in recruiting, to pump that intent up to try and get more drivers in orientation.
I mean, it's not that weird. Freight rates have found a new barrel to get to the bottom of, and people are near capacity. What's weird about that?
I don't know. I think the cool word right now is stagflation. So we'll see what happens
in this economy.
2024, gotta love it. So with that being said, who's our sponsor today?
We got Decker Truck Line. They're driven to be the best. You should check them out at drivedecker.com.
All right, cool. And another thing on top of that, quick announcement. I know we've brought it up before, but again, March 21st through the 23rd, we will be at Matt's. We'll be around. We'll be talking to people. We'll be doing interviews, maybe a little bit of shenanigans, probably nothing too crazy. We even have a speaking event. They're giving us microphones and putting us on a stage.
It's exciting. I look forward to seeing everyone. And yes, this is something to be excited about. He was not threatening you. We will be at Matt's. We're going to have a good time. We promise you you'll have one. We hope.
All right. Well, it's time for the news. All right. So it's time for 10-2 news. So this week we got a couple stories from CDLLife, the largest news and entertainment website for truck drivers. The first one, oh my gosh.
Choices were made.
Right. So you hear a lot of times about, you know, like, oh, this person got caught smuggling this in a truck. You know, like the one time we talked about the driver with the cocaine going to Canada and all of that. This one might be my favorite. So this truck driver was smuggling cocaine basically across the border and a load full of limes. $3 million of cocaine to be precise. But instead of just like packing the cocaine like under the trailer, or, like inside the barrels of limes or the tubs of limes, there were tubs. We if we can show the screenshot. But what they did was for the cocaine, instead of just burying it or packing it somewhere or putting it inside the limes or something innovative, they literally just wrapped the limes and wrapping paper. Or sorry, they literally wrapped the cocaine in wrapping paper with photorealistic limes on it.
This photo, man, as soon as we pulled it up, I started chuckling to myself because I'm like, oh, someone actually thought this was a good idea.
So they're like, oh, how do we smuggle these limes to where no one would have any idea? Oh, well, let's just wrap the cocaine in lime paper.
I just want to know, like, do people make lime themed wrapping paper? I guess they have to.
Apparently they do. And they got a hold of someone when they were trying to smuggle his cocaine. But yeah, I guess when he pulled up, one of the canine agents started barking, and so they got suspicious. They went in, they went through all the limes and found cocaine wrapped in lime wrapping paper.
He might have had a better chance if he had like half a trailer of Corona or something.
Right. At least it sounds like a party. So that being said, our second one, CDLLife found out what truckers are saying about the Airbnb of truck parking, which I found as an interesting title. And turns out it's about Truck Parking Club, our buddy Evan.
Yeah, this is kind of cool, man. So they've been doing some cool stuff, but he went on the road trip with Indie Trucker to see what it was like out on the road. And, you know, then he went in before the Tennessee Congress to talk about the whole truck parking shortage and how much more can be done there. To see the article kind of encapsulate everything they're doing a better job of this than the government. So, I mean, what can we do to help this guy along?
Well, I mean, and that's what I mean. It's nice to see someone actually like come up with a solution that's not just a band-aid. Sure, it's not necessarily like, there's obviously got to be money involved because someone's got to pay for it. But it's nice to see someone actually like going out and actively creating a solution for a huge problem that drivers face. So yeah, stuff they're doing over there at Truck Parking Club, which they're going to be at Matt's with Dooner. So they'll be there too. You can check them out for sure.
Yeah, and you look at the feedback and stuff that the drivers are giving, the property owners that are making a little money off dead space, and just the user friendliness of this whole process. It's cool. I definitely think people should go to truckparkingclub.com and check them out.
All right, cool. Well, I think with that, it's time for our main topic. All right, it's time for Behind the Wheel. So being, a part of CDLLife, we actually get access to their audience and can ask real drivers real questions about real issues and get real answers. So talking about intent, we've asked a couple questions previously that I thought kind of putting all of them together kind of paint a really interesting picture of what trying to garner intent from drivers actually looks like. So the first one was previously we'd asked, how often are you approached by other companies to come work for them? 27% said daily, 18% said weekly, 17% said multiple times per month, and 38% said rarely. Now, on another one, we asked about if drivers look at multiple companies when they're changing jobs, and then additionally, we had asked how many they actually apply for. So 80% of drivers look at multiple companies when changing jobs, and over 60% of them apply at multiple carriers. So not only do you have 60% of drivers being approached multiple times a month about working at other carriers, 60% of these drivers are actually applying at multiple carriers.
We've talked about this stuff before where a lot of people think you have to address leads differently and applicants differently depending on the source, and you kind of do. But whether they're a match lead or a direct lead, they're making multiple attempts, so they all should be treated with the same sense of urgency, in my opinion, because they're not just knocking on one door, and depending on the door they knock on, they might actually open several doors.
But then, I mean, the question with that though too is yeah, while we've talked about it before, like for a lot of drivers, it's kind of a fact finding thing, that sort of stuff. But like my question is, from a carrier perspective, when that is the situation you're dealing with, how do you create intent out of that?
Well, I mean, crazy thought here is you have to build meaningful connections and you have to have meaningful conversations and you have to be authentic because they talk to so many people that they've been baptized by fire and they can read through the BS.
And that's what I mean. There's lots of things you can, that you should be doing. But I guess a better question, which leads us towards our main topic, is how. So that's pretty much what we're talking about today. So I think it's a good segue into our main topic.
All right, gentlemen, it's time for our main segment, which is Make Sense, Make Sense. I'm going to pass it over to you guys to make some sense out of intent.
When you're doing recruiting, you're dealing with people. We've talked about this multiple times. And when you're dealing with people, that is your wild card. You could have the best marketing. You could have the best, most motivated recruiting setup. You could have the best lead gen, feeding your system. But if you can't deal with people, you're going to fall flat. And part of recruiting is being able to gauge their engagement. And in order to have that, you have to have those meaningful conversations. So I think there's a lot that goes into building intent that a lot of people don't think about. They just want to put a measuring stick against it and say, hey, where's my ROI? But your ROI gets convoluted when you're dealing with people. There's multiple contributing factors that determine your success, both technical and in the execution of the conversation. So I think we should just start dissecting it from start to finish. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think that's great. So, I mean, from the start of it, like we had just previously talked about in the Behind the Wheel segment, you have all these multiple carriers that, a lot of them, while every carrier is different and you can present yourself different ways, ultimately the job is relatively similar. Like, I mean, if you're doing OTR, like, I mean, realistically, the biggest difference is going to be what kind of trailer is you're hauling behind you and like what kind of stuff you're loading and how far your length of haul is. But ultimately there's a lot of similarities. So with that, it's like trying to make yourself stick out, I think boils down to experience. Like, what is the experience like for the driver who's checking out your company?
Well, and that starts somewhere. So, I mean, let's look at how intent starts early in the process, in my opinion, in the marketing. And, you work in media, you know how important it is carrying across that message properly and accurately depicting what it is. It starts in your marketing, capturing that culture, capturing the job, communicating that thoroughly through the marketing. And then there's the technical side of things. There's all kinds of technology that can help gauge engagement and build intent behind the leads and the applicants. Being that you guys work on lead gen on the CDLLife side, that's your specialty, is helping build that higher intent, bringing those applicants forward. But at Hot Seat Services, we deal with people. We're dealing with real conversations. We're presenting them with the offers. We're making sure that we connect those problems to solutions wherever we're looking at sending a driver. And it also promotes retention when you're taking that kind of approach to it. You're focused on connecting the dots. If I can identify where someone has a problem and how this solves it, I'm going to be able to connect those dots and form a meaningful relationship. But then I also have to be able to gauge their engagement and know where I sit on that intent scale. Do they intend to actually show up, or are they just placating a conversation? Do they attend on taking the next call to action, which is moving to an application? Whatever the desired outcome might be, I have to be able to gauge that. And a lot of people fall short on this. They don't want to have those conversations. They don't want to ask those awkward questions. So, Paul, being that you come from a recruiting and media side, on the media side and the lead gen side, how do you think people can build better intent?
Well, I think a big part of it is one, authenticity. And authenticity is a word that I feel like has almost been tossed around enough over the past few years that it almost feels inauthentic to say authenticity, because a lot of things pass for that. Uh, right. But I think one thing that's important to that is consistency. I mean, like, so for instance, like, just even as a normal person, if you're getting any kind of offer, if what is stated in the ad that you see, whether it's a video, whether it's, ad copy, is the exact same thing you hear the first time you talk to a person, like almost verbatim, that provides a sense of comfort. There should be that consistency there. And then, on when you get to orientation, or you talk to anybody else between talking to the recruiter the first time in orientation, whether you're a company that lets them talk to a member of operations, or you have somebody, a processor who like books travel and that kind of stuff, it's important to have extremely consistent, almost like similar verbiage messaging the whole way through. I think that's huge, especially, and that starts with marketing, because that gives a sense of intent. It drives a point home. It's something that's going to stick in their head, but it also provides a sense of comfort that you're not just making stuff up, or say whatever you get to the sale. It's what they bought into, that gave them any sort of interest that got them on the hook, is a thing.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, like, that's just one of the many ways you can do it. One of the quirkier things that I did when I was working at boots on the ground in recruiting was I got comfortable being uncomfortable. So one of the things I read in a book one time about, asking questions is more powerful than making statements. So I tested one of the things I read in the book. It was a very uncomfortable situation. I just had a driver turn down my job offer. And I just diverted back to the chapter I just read in the book. And I'm like, hey, is there something I said or didn't say that caused you to lean this way? Or is there something I did or didn't do? And I'm expecting this person to kind of laugh at me. It was uncomfortable. It was the first time I'm letting these words leave my mouth in unfamiliar territory. And the response was actually overwhelming. The driver was shocked that I was willing to not just hang up the phone and move on like most recruiters would do, and that I cared enough to try to not only better ourselves as a company, but my approach. And they told me what the competitors were offering. They told me what was being presented out there, and that they were so kind of moved by the fact that I still kept poking and interested in why, that driver wound up next week showing up to our orientation just out of that, because no one else does it. So I think that there's a lot of ways to increase intent. And depending on how you're structured, depends on which ones will work for you. But I think just being able to evaluate it, put yourself out there and ask those questions. You might not like the answer, but you might be able to be better because of it, or measure.
Well, and I think that's vital too, because it's one of those things, like I hate that, people say that there's a sales aspect to recruiting, because there is. But at the same time, it's one of those things, if you look at it from that perspective, it's like any time that there can be a sales aspect, usually you're trying to provide a solution. And if you're not, I mean, usually that's the best way to do it, is to present it as a solution. And this driver is calling you looking for a solution, either where they're working at isn't working great, or they want to improve, their lifestyle, or, stack cash for the future, or whatever it happens to be. But like, you're providing a solution. And if I call you and you're trying to sell me a product or a position or something like that, and you're just like spouting at me everything, the stats, what you can offer, I can do this for you, I can blah, 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 blah. If you're not asking questions, you don't know what I actually need. So you can't tell me what you can provide me that can actually solve the issues that I have, or, like solve for whatever I'm looking to do. And so I think it's huge to ask those questions, because then once that person knows that you're actually there to solve their problems, that's kind of a game changer too. And you're way more likely to keep someone on the hook that way.
All right. Well, we're getting ready to hop over here, and we got Jacob Ridge with CDLLife. Jacob, welcome to Cents Per Mile. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, things are going good over here.
So we're hoping that you can weigh in a little bit with your expertise. You guys deal a lot with the analytics, building an audience. Tell us a little bit about how we can build intent.
Yeah, I might go on a little bit of a tangent here, but there's a lot of things that are kind of worth considering. I think a good starting point, I think, for a lot of people in recruiting to recognize is that when you get a lead, that's really just a starting point. And I think a lot of people, when they get a lead, have a lot of preconceptions that are probably missing the mark about where a driver is really at in the process. And every time that you get a lead, I think maybe you imagine, well, this person is applying to me, they're looking for a job and they want to come work here. And to some extent, there's probably some truth to that. But the reality is, and you guys discussed it earlier in the show, drivers are solicited by carriers a lot, and they'll indulge themselves in a conversation with a carrier a lot, because a lot of them are, open to considering them. And I think maybe it's possible that some people could be discouraged by that in the recruiting side of things. They might think that, like, oh, well, I'm talking to all these people who aren't really that serious about coming to work for me. I think that's probably the wrong attitude. I think in a lot of ways that it's actually a really positive thing, and it's a really great opportunity to start a relationship, because realistically, a driver is, when they're considering changing jobs, they're not considering every company out there all at once. When they're genuinely ready to move, they've had 5 companies that they've probably talked to in the past 6 months, and maybe they weren't ready at the time, but they've talked to them before. They've got a rapport with somebody. They've learned a thing or two. They've compared and contrasted. And really what you want to do is you want to have a pool of as many drivers that are in that state as possible. And to do that, you have to start having those initial conversations. You have to start building relationships with them. They have to have a certain degree of familiarity with you, and then you with them as well. I mean, you want to think about it a little bit as if, like, you had a buddy that you wanted to come work with you, and he's kind of thought about it once or twice. And are you going to have the conversation once and he wasn't ready then, and then just never talk about it again? No. You're going to probably kind of poke him here and there. Something new happens, send him an article, call him again, hang out with him one time and just have check-in calls, and maybe kind of push him again to fill out an application again. And you're also not going to do that by just sending him like a pre-planned text once a week, or shooting him an email with the same.
Wait, You mean repeated templates over and over again and beaten down by submission does not work for hiring?
Well, it's definitely not authentic, and it's also not a real relationship. And drivers are real personable people, and relationships matter a lot to them, and trust matters a lot to them. And to do that, you're going to actually have to kind of invest a little bit of time in them. And I understand time is money, right? And that's difficult. And you really have to get the right signals, and you have to have the right partners in place for your recruiting and your marketing to get the signals about where drivers are at and what your next steps need to be as a recruiter to be efficient with your outreach, right? And to be efficient with your recruiting time. And ultimately, you want to get your recruiters on the phone with somebody, and you want to have them have some kind of productive conversation with them. But is productive merely, do I get someone to come to orientation next week? I don't believe that that's really the sole definition of productive. I think productive is, I've got relationships that I'm cultivating with a big pool of drivers, and I've got good candidates for tomorrow, next week, next month, 3 months, 6 months from now, because I'm actually starting to build that pool of drivers. That is what we call intent. That's what we call building and sustaining intent. And that's how, yeah, that's I didn't say pipeline. No. That's intent. And that's how you cultivate a relationship. And you have to have signals to do that. And you have to have a plan in place. You have to have partners in place to be able to do that.
So speaking of partners and people that can help you with intent, you guys are in the business of building intent. What's some of the cool things you got to help with those?
Of course, we do our lead gen services, and we've got a big audience where we can help you get in touch with drivers and get your message out there and get them familiar with you. And beyond that, because then you want to start having a kind of conversation about, well, how do I get those initial touch points into relationships, and how do I give my recruiters indicators about how to build relationships with that driver? And we have a tool called Driver Connect, and it's really helpful in this direction for a lot of ways. One way in which, when you get a lead, you can kind of get some insights about that driver, and you can kind of get an estimation of what their intent is like, also what their competition is like. It can also kind of give you tools to start grading the recruiter's assessment of whether or not you think this person is a good fit or a poor fit. If you think you need help reaching out to this person, that kind of intel given back to our system through Driver Connect will help us to find more drivers who are similar. Also will inform our lead nurturing so that we can lead nurture them in a direction that's productive for you. And we also, the core of Driver Connect, have a functionality where you can put in there the direct line to a recruiter and their name and the times that you're best able to receive calls. And then we'll have our agents, our call center agents, work within that schedule to go out there and help get in touch with that driver and get that driver on the phone with you directly to a recruiter with a name and a direct line. And that's close to a relationship. And that's what Driver Connect does to help you build a relationship with that driver.
So that's really cool stuff. So just kind of recapping, we talked earlier about how Truck Parking Club is solving the truck parking problem, and Hot Seat Services is connecting today's drivers to today's carriers. And you guys are over here building a massive audience and increasing intent. I mean, it sounds like the end of the days for all the problems coming to trucking in one place.
We definitely recognize that the task in front of recruiting is a big one. It's a difficult one, and that the market's very.
Well, hold on. Recruiting is easy. It's like unicorns, rainbows, fluffy clouds made of cotton candy. It's easy.
The market is tight, and recruiters have a big task in front of them, and drivers are also becoming aware that they're a hot commodity, and their needs and expectations have changed a little bit as well.
You know what's a hot commodity? Some freight right now. That's what we all need, is some freight right now. There's a lot of drivers out of there. There's a lot of trucks on the road. We need some freight. I think you guys are solving a lot of problems. The next one you need to turn your light to is finding us freight. Jacob, if people wanted to get a hold of you guys over at CDLLife, how would they do so?
Yeah, I would recommend that you all visit our website at cdlconnect.io and learn more about us. And there's an option there to get in touch with us, and let's start a conversation about what you need and what we can do for you.
Well, great stuff as always. Appreciate you coming on Cents Per Mile, my guy.
Too often, recruiters struggle to reach qualified applicants or prioritize which leads to contact. The answer to improving lead quality is amplifying driver intent by nurturing meaningful personal connections at the right time, when the applicant is still engaged and interested in your position. What if lead nurturing was as simple as a trained professional proactively making contact with your applicant, confirming the candidate's interest, and connecting the driver to your recruiting line? Well, with the Intent Engine, it really can be. No answer? No problem. You'll never waste time dialing and redialing. We'll make multiple attempts to follow up with every candidate and automatically follow up with the full application details or a call to action to connect with your team via text message. Our custom Intent Engine solutions will achieve your company's unique goals, from lead prioritization within your ATS to further nurturing or full app prioritization. 80% of drivers reached via the Intent Engine confirm interest in the position and are ready to connect with a recruiter immediately. Our Intent solutions are changing the game when it comes to enabling recruiting teams to turn leads into genuine driver relationships.
Well, we're back. That was some great stuff. We talked about intent, how you gauge it, how you get it. Jacob over at CDLLife gave a couple key tips to how you use that and what you should be looking for. But Paul, it comes down to what we talked about before: having communication, building relationships, and paying attention to what's going on out there. You have to be intentional about gaining intent.
Right. Well, I mean, it's all about relationships, and it's all about building relationships. I mean, it's pretty cool to see. I mean, especially because I see some of this stuff coming down the pipeline. So if you ever want to nerd out with me about it,
buzzword,
right? Again, but I see a lot of the stuff coming out, and the stuff on the horizon too, and like some of the stuff they're doing over there to actually just foster these situations that companies should be able to put themselves in anyway, but like doing like it almost like supercharge the process. It's pretty cool. So I think especially on your end, the future of recruiting, I think there's some pretty cool stuff coming.
The future's here. It's hot seat services, brother.
Well, you got stuff that you could be equipped with too.
Hey, speaking of the future, Charles, don't forget, we will be at Matt's.
We're going to be at Matt's. We're going to be on stage. Looking forward to it. You guys should go to the link down below. Register if you're not already going. But other than that, we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.